I have some more naughty and nice Christmas adjacent retro video games. Joystick. I am back in good old jolly Portland, Oregon, here on the Burnside Bridge. My friends at the United Yule Amusement Workers and Service Employees at the North Pole gave me 5 more Christmas-era video games to tell you about. Some of them are quite nice as holiday chocolate, and some of them are as naughty as eggnog that has been sitting out overnight. Now, on to the games. Yakuza 5, also known as Ryuga Gotoku 5. Like a Dragon 5, Fulfiller of Dreams for PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PC, and Xbox One. Yakuza 5 is clearly a festive Christmas game. It is entirely set in the month of December and has several Christmas-themed missions as well as snowy scenery and emotionally charged themes of family. There is also a Christmas level where badass gangster Saejima has to dress up as Santa Claus and beat up some Santa hunting punks with an intense Santa smackdown, and then make the kids happy with new presents. I have been a fan of the Yakuza games for a while now, and I've been trying to figure out a good way to bring them up on this channel. Originally known as Ryuga Gotoku, or Like a Dragon in Japan, Sega recently decided to call new games in the series Like a Dragon instead of Yakuza, but I'm going to call it Yakuza in this video since the game is officially called Yakuza 5, and they're also about Yakuza. They are a cinematic gangster action game series set in an open-world area in modern Japan with a plot centering on the trials and tribulations of some super melodramatic gangsters. I personally think it's a little intellectually lazy and inaccurate to compare the Yakuza game series to the Grand Theft Auto because I consider the Yakuza series to be a direct spiritual descendant from Shenmue on Dreamcast. Also, the Yakuza series has better writing, better acting, better world building, and much more compelling characters and is more technically impressive than Grand Theft Auto. They are actually centered around a decent plot, acting, and not just random acts of violence. But there's still quite a bit of hand-to-hand combat and over-the-top violence, but not without honor and duty. It's a bit strange to think of it as a retro game, but it is now 11 years old and 2 hardware generations behind. Yakuza 5 was the last Yakuza game on the PlayStation 3, and we are much closer to the era of the PlayStation 6 than the PlayStation 3. This game featured an entirely new game engine which could transition between street scenes and combat fights without loading scene or cuts. It just seems better to have combat that can start in the environments. Instead of being just about series main protagonist Kiryu Kazama, it follows 5 different storylines of 5 different characters. One of them is Kiryu, but you actually play as Haruka for the first time in the series. In Kazuma Kiryu's chapter, the epic legendary gangster is trying to live a new life as a simple taxi driver under a new identity. But he quickly gets sucked right back into the same national Yakuza organization drama llama drama. And not only do you have to balance your new job, including the honor of the way of the taxi, but there's a racing mode where Kiryu has to take down bosozoku street racers. And there is a taxi simulator mode where you have to get your customers to their destination safely while maintaining excellent customer service and maintaining all traffic safety regulations and laws, including using turn signals and slowly accelerating while making small talk with your customer. I'm sure you've played Sega's Crazy Taxi, but can you handle playing Sensible Taxi? I guess not. Also, you get powered up by Eurobeat tunes when Kiryu has to put the smackdown initial D style on some young punks in street racing battles. Set in Fukuoka, there is more regional food to enjoy. Living vicariously through Kiryu's stomach is a major theme to the Yakuza series. Haruka Sawamura is Kiryu's adopted daughter, now all grown up and trying to make it as a pop idol singer. Instead of fighting, you get into dance battles, and there's also a fan handshaking mode, talk show chat minigame, drag queen applied makeup power-ups, and dance instructors, and there's an excellent recreation of downtown Osaka. I love the Haruka storyline portion. Yakuza 5 is an interesting combination of 5 different stories from 5 different characters, and I suspect that all the storylines come together in the end. The Yakuza games were a little hit and miss in the West during the PlayStation 3 days, and there was no physical release in the West on PlayStation 3, but it was on the PSN store. With the many different storylines, each character change makes the game seem new again. This entry is actually a great way to get into the series, and is surprisingly bite-sized and fresh since it keeps switching protagonists. Kazuma Kiryu brings the Christmas cheer. Yakuza 5 is an amazing Christmas game that is not to be missed. Batman Returns for Super Nintendo Super Famicom by Konami. Batman Returns by Konami was made in a brief time when there were some really good game developers putting in the necessary effort to make a really good 2D beat-em-up action game that is fun and also highly accurate to the movie and source material. It is a Christmas game by default because it's set in Christmas time and there is a lot of Christmas-themed graphics and snowy locations. The game is heavily influenced by Capcom's Final Fight, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I really like how Batman can throw bad guys into the ground and slam them against each other and slam them back against the walls. It really follows the movie and has a good amount of holiday cheer and Tim Burton spookiness. Despite the Penguin and Catwoman being the main bad guys, you mainly fight the Penguin's clowns and circus friends. Technically, it's a really impressive game, and there's some good use of transparency effects in the fire level, and you have to use Batman's grappling hooks to get around a store that's on fire. Later on, there are some Batmobile driving levels using SNES Mode 7 effects. By the way, this is a totally different game than the Mega CD, Sega CD, and Mega Drive Genesis versions of Batman Returns, and those were also quite good. I used to really enjoy playing Batman Returns for Super Nintendo and Super Famicom back in the day, and it still holds up as a well-made, very fun 16-bit Batman brawler game, perfect for the holidays. Snow Bros by Toaplun. Japanese arcade developer Toaplun is known for creating some amazing shoot-'em-up shmup arcade games, but they actually created a festive arcade game called Snow Bros, or Snow Brothers Nick and Tom, as their last arcade release. It plays like a classic one-screen arcade game. You play as princes turned into magical snowmen who have to throw snowballs at monsters to turn them into bigger snowballs and then push them into walls. It is a classic two-player simultaneous action game that is similar in gameplay to Taito's Bubble Bobble. There is a ton of snow and festivity, but Christmas is not openly called out, but I don't think it's too much of a stretch to consider this a Christmas game. The Famicom and NES versions featured a story intro that established the characters Nick and Tom, the Snow Brothers, are actually human princes who are cursed and turned into snowmen by an evil demon king named King Scorch. That really sounds a lot like the Heat Miser in the Rankin and Bass Christmas specials to me. There also was a Game Boy version called Snow Bros Jr. Tengen, a division of Atari of all people, published a decent port to the Sega Mega Drive that was only released in Japan, and it was the only home port that was developed by Toaplan themselves. The Mega Drive version is included on both the Japanese and Asian versions of the Sega Mega Drive Mini, but not on the Western versions of the Sega Genesis Mini. The Mega Drive version also included 20 additional levels where you play as the twin princesses Puri Puri and Poochie Poochie after the twin snowmen princes get kidnapped themselves. All versions have big bosses and over 50 levels of snowball throwing action. It might be a little bit of a Christmas stretch, but there are sushi pieces that are left as a common treat after defeating the monsters. I like to continue the Jewish tradition about going out for Asian food on Christmas, since it is some of the only places that are still left open. In the past, I've gotten Korean food and Japanese food, instead of just the traditional Chinese culinary fare. The arcade version of Snow Bros is included on the Toaplan Arcade 1 Evercade collection. Snow Bros is a lot of fun, and it is a perfect couch co-op game that is often overlooked, but it is a ton of wintry fun and a great game to stay inside and play with your friends and family this holiday season. Die Hard Arcade for Sega Saturn by Sega, also known as Dynamite Deca. As Generation X and Millennials slowly become the dominant age groups, they get to define what is and isn't considered a holiday tradition. If the movie Home Alone is now considered to be a wholesome holiday classic, then by God, so is Die Hard. Sega created a 3D beat-em-up arcade game that is very loosely based on the movie Die Hard. The arcade version was based on the Saturn ST-V platform that was basically a Sega Saturn in an arcade case. The home Saturn version was also developed at the same time. The plot differs from the movie a ton. In the English version, John McClane and Kris Thompsen try to save the president's daughter from terrorists that have captured a skyscraper. It is interesting to note that Sega did not have the publishing rights to the games based on the movie Die Hard in Japan, but they did overseas. That's why it shares similar themes but was called Dynamite Deca. This game even had a non-Die Hard inspired sequel in the arcades and on Dreamcast called Dynamite Cop. Sega included an old arcade game, Deep Scan, from 1976 on the Saturn version that you can play to earn extra credits in Die Hard Arcade. And that brings me to my one and only complaint, is that you actually have a limited amount of continues, despite the game being based on a 100 yen and quarter munching arcade game. Personally, I believe that if you're going to pay for a console port of an arcade game, you should have the option to have unlimited coins. The graphics are a little blocky and wonky, but are actually pretty good for the era. I'm sort of surprised that there is so much fist-to-fist action considering the movie had a ton of gun violence. There are firearms that you can pick up and use, as well as hand-to-hand melee weapons. It's a little weird that you could use a rocket launcher in close proximity combat indoors, but whatever, it was a 90s arcade game. It also had some pretty sweet action game cinematics where you are running and had to press either punch, kick, or jump at certain times to lay the smackdown on a bad guy. Now, I want to point out that this is not the same game as Die Hard Trilogy for arcade, Saturn, and PlayStation. That was a light gun game. There was a Saturn version, but it wasn't made by Sega. Die Hard Arcade is a stupid fun couch co-op over-the-top action game that you and your gender non-specific sibling can team up with and beat the holy crap out of some international terrorists. Just remember, Christmas isn't over until Hans Gruber falls from the top of the Nakatomi Tower. Happy holidays and Yippie Ki-Yay! Santa Claus no Takarabako for Famicom Disk System by Data East, 1987. Of all the games on this list, this is by far the most directly Christmas related. However, it can be argued that it's not a game, but it's definitely worth talking about. Roughly translated as Santa Claus's Treasure Box, it was a budget software release for the Famicom Disk System in 1987. Designed by Music Plan Limited, it was published by Data East. There are two parts of this software, an animated Christmas card maker portion and a questionable party game portion. In the Christmas card maker mode, this is not really a game, but it's interactive software. There are 3 variable text fields, to, from, and the actual message, that you can fill using an on-screen keyboard in both English and Japanese, but without kanji. Then you can pick 3 graphic scenes, including a Japanese Christmas cake at a holiday party, a Christmas tree through a window, and a white snowy Christmas scene at night. There are 3 Famicom Disk System 8-bit renditions of Jingle Bells, Silent Night, and O Christmas Tree, or O Tannenbaum. There's also a little animated Santa that you can change the sprites on if you so desire. Party game mode. When I say party games, you're probably thinking about Mario Party and games like that. However, these are quite literally games that you're supposed to play at a Christmas party, and they're not necessarily interactive, and the program doesn't keep score. There is bingo, roulette, a slot machine, and poker dice. The graphics are colorful and competent, but there's quite literally no interactivity. You hit the button to have the machine generate a random number on bingo, spin the roulette wheel, and pull a slot machine lever or roll the poker dice, but you're on your own to keep track of the score. These are also 4 games that are completely random, with luck and no skill involved. As a Jewish gamer, I think that there's a real missed opportunity that they could have included dreidel, because it is quite literally another game of luck with no skill involved. I mean, you spin the dreidel, and that's about the same as rolling some dice. This never saw a release outside of Japan in 1987, but there's actually a fan translation on romhacking.net, and that's amusing because there's barely any text that would require translation besides the title screen. Even back in 1987, I couldn't realistically see anyone sitting around and playing these games at a Christmas party, when they actually had a Famicom right there and they could actually play much more fun Famicom games on said Famicom. Santa Claus no Takarabako is amusing in its existence, and I find it fascinating that some software developers made interactive software for the Famicom Disk System that wasn't exactly a game. I Am a Teacher Super Mario Bros. Sweater comes to mind. This was before the internet and before personal computers were a common thing. I guess the idea was you could have this on a Famicom Disk System floppy disk, write a brief holiday message to someone, and pass it around to your friends who also had Famicom Disk Systems. That is very, very 1980s and very, very hacker-like. It's also rather adorable. This is interesting from a historical perspective, but it's not going to blow anyone's minds, but it is a very Showa era way to celebrate the holidays. This December, I hope that you stay warm, stay off the roads when they are bad, bundle up before going out, and have a good time with your friends and family. It is a perfect time to enjoy some holiday video games. It would be a holiday present to me if you would like this video, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any upcoming videos, and ring the bell so you get notified when a new video is published. Happy holidays and Hag Semeach. This is 8-Bit Joystick. Stay awesome. Play retro.